Hello, everyone, this is玉木Uchiro. Thank you for always watching the Tamaki channel. Today, I'd like to sit down and give you a news-style report in a slightly different style. Today's theme is the lottery system for coalition seats.
Taki channel. Right now, the Liberal Democratic Party and the Japan Innovation Party are discussing reducing the number of seats in the Diet, as it was one of the promises made in the coalition agreement. However, they believe that simply reducing the number of seats is wrong, and that they should at least come up with a reduction plan that is consistent with electoral system reform. Right now, the Japan Innovation Party and the Liberal Democratic Party are trying to submit a bill, and the content of the bill is to reduce the number of seats by 10%. However, the content of the bill will be decided through discussions at the Electoral System Reform Council, which includes each party. However, if a decision cannot be made within a year, the bill will automatically reduce the number of seats by 25, and the proportional representation seats by 20, for a total of 45. The legal theory behind this bill is a bit rough. So, what we are proposing is to think carefully about reforming the electoral system within a year, even though the focus is now on cutting back on the number of seats if something can't be done. One proposal from the Democratic Party for the People is to drastically change the electoral system to a system of consecutive elections by lottery, and create 140 electoral districts nationwide where 3 people are elected, which would reduce the number to 420. The current number of seats is 465, so that would reduce the number by 45, or about 10%. However, rather than simply reducing the number of seats under the current system, we need to consider the various drawbacks of the current system, which combines single-member and proportional representation. We have been using this system for about 30 years, but various drawbacks have been pointed out. Therefore, we believe that it would be better to reduce the number of seats in the Diet in conjunction with the drastic change to a new system of consecutive elections by lottery. That is why we have presented a concrete proposal. A lottery is, as it says here, an election in which multiple candidates are selected in one election. Usually, 3 to 5 candidates are selected, and a lottery is an election in which one candidate is selected. A single election is when one candidate is selected from a constituency, and a large election is when 10, 20, or 30 candidates are selected. The current Japanese House of Representatives parliamentary system is basically a single election system in which the election is divided into constituencies and one candidate is selected from each constituency. However, there is a slightly complicated system in which there is a proportional representation ballot on the second ballot. In the House of Representatives in particular, proportional representation is also voted on, and the names of political parties are written on this ballot, and the number of seats assigned to each party is determined by the total number of votes for each party. Those who lost in the single election are called the red rate, and in order of closeness, they are elected through the proportional representation system. It is often said that this is a proportional representation system, so in some cases, people who lost in the single election are elected, and in other cases, there are 2 members in a certain constituency, such as the Liberal Democratic Party and the Constitutional Democratic Party, or the Liberal Democratic Party and the National Party. In some cases, it is difficult to understand why they are called zombie members, who lost in the single election once but still survived by winning through the proportional representation system. Also, if someone inherits a constituency that has been in place for a long time, it is difficult for new people to enter, and this hinders the turnover of new members and prevents new talent from entering the political world. In particular, it has been said that if someone from the same party continues to run, that person will have an advantage over their former incumbent and will run in the next election, making it difficult for new members to advance in the political world. Well, what we propose is that, first of all, if multiple candidates can be selected in a single election, it doesn't mean that you can only choose one person, but multiple candidates, and as I'll write next, this consecutive election is a lottery system, and normally, you can only choose one person, but if the number of seats is 3, you can choose up to 2 people. If you can choose up to 2 people, you can choose your favorite person, your second favorite person, and so on, so the range of choices increases significantly. Now, as for the advantages, I've written them below, but as I said earlier, it's a system that can reflect diverse public opinion. Also, since it's consecutive election, there used to be a lottery system, but the biggest problem is that if you can only choose one person in the lottery system, for example, 2 people from the Liberal Democratic Party will run. In that case, since they're from the same Liberal Democratic Party, their policies will basically be the same. They're from the same political party, but because they had to differentiate themselves, they started competing on things other than policy, and so-called service mergers occurred. In the past, when it wasn't prohibited, if you went to a campaign office, you would find that this candidate had thicker sashimi or something like that, and so on, and they would compete on things other than policy, so it was basically a close-range politics. For example, if there were 4 candidates running, like the LDP, the DPJ, and the Democratic Party, if you said, I want the LDP to do well, so I'll vote for the LDP for these 2, you could suppress the conflict within the LDP, avoid conflict within the same election, avoid conflict between members of the same party, and prevent competition other than policy from becoming a close-range election. In addition, it creates an incentive for the party to work together as a team, so there is also the advantage of suppressing individual elections. As I mentioned earlier, since each person has 2 votes, they can vote for their favorite candidate, but at the same time, if they want this group to win, they can strategically cast 2 votes for the opposition party or the ruling party. This means that even if the election is by lottery, it will be possible to change the government. In a sense, it is said that this system will make it easier to reshuffle the votes. On the other hand, there are some disadvantages. Since it will be by lottery, it will be a bit complicated. Furthermore, since it is a consecutive election, each person will have 2 votes. Even now, each person has 2 votes for the single election and proportional representation elections. However, since everyone will be casting these 2 votes for candidates A and B or A and C in the same constituency, the system will be different and more complicated. The Election Management Commission has also pointed out that it may become a bit sloppy in terms of administrative procedures. On the other hand, another disadvantage that is often mentioned is that university students tend to monopolize 2 or 3 of the 3 candidates, and since they can produce a lot of candidates, it is said that this is advantageous for major political parties. Therefore, it is important to take measures that are advantageous to minority parties. Assuming that we are living in an age of gender equality, one idea for creating political stability is to use a lottery system and a continuous system. As I mentioned earlier, reducing the number of candidates should not be done arbitrarily. If the population is decreasing, it is reasonable to reduce the number of candidates in accordance with the pace of population decline. For example, the population is expected to decrease by 2.9% in the 10 years from 2015 to 2025. Therefore, the average decrease would be 14 to 15 candidates per 10 years. Therefore, it would take about 30 years to reduce the number of candidates by 45. That is one way of thinking about it. Well, this is the first time for us. We have proposed a fundamental electoral system reform that involves a reduction in the number of seats in the Diet ahead of the other parties. So from now on, we will seek the understanding of each party and each group and do our best to quickly obtain this electoral system reform proposal. Channel. The important point is to make it easier for talented people to enter this world. It's not about strictly restricting people from entering, but rather, we want to create a system in which good competition and competition occur in the world of politics. By the way, this is a phrase that you may hear in various places, but I think we have been working on it for a long time. Yes, today I explained about the electoral system reform. Please subscribe to the Tamaki channel.